why does this property have this score? Can you tell us why this one has got a higher score? And the answer is, if we start sharing that level of demographic information, the cost goes from 2 to 6 cents to $2 to $3 per line.
Yeah.
Because data is a whole industry in itself.
What are you innovating now? What are you kind of iterating, improving, optimizing for real estate investors right now?
Well, real estate investors, it's just getting...
Hey, welcome everybody to the King Show. I've got Fred Castonguay here with Reworked.ai. This is going to be a fascinating episode, especially if you're into AI, you're tracking AI. You can't ignore it anymore. Like maybe years ago, there was that one or two people you knew, right, that talked about AI, and now it's like you cannot ignore it. It's even on mainstream media now, right? So we're going to kind of have Fred demystify AI and then really talk about what his company does, because man, it's innovative in our space, especially. I don't even know of anybody else doing it, right? So you guys are definitely pioneers in the market, and we'll get into it later. We'll talk about how we've kind of tested out the product. But hey, Fred, welcome to the show.
Travis, thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not going to, make you explain what is AI, right? We're not going to go like that, dumb it down that much, but let's just kind of start out with, what is Reworked? What do you guys do over there?
So we're bringing digital to an analog space, right?
Yeah.
I am a land flipper, a land investor, and have been for the better part of 7 years. I remember when I was getting started and really digging into it, listening to a lot of podcasts, and people kept talking about volume. You got to get paper on the street, right? It's just the law of large numbers. So I was doing 15,000 plus mailers a month, getting great deal flow and enjoying it. And I ended up sending a mailer to my current partner at Reworked.ai. And turns out he's a data scientist, computer engineer. And what we started talking about was, how can we do scrubbing? Right, that's the word that a lot of your listeners are going to be.
So you mail a letter, though. I got to back up. You mail a letter trying to buy somebody's land, and they call you back up and say, "Hey, let's start an AI company together." Or unpack that a little bit.
That's our meet cute, right? So he called, and I'm giving him the spiel. Hey, I could buy this property quick, cash. And he said, look, full disclosure, I have no interest in selling this property. However, I keep getting these letters, and I want to know what you guys are doing. And he seemed like a nice person. So I said, well, this is what this is what we do. And I explained land flipping and land investing. And he's like, yeah, but why would you send it to me? Right? I don't think I fit the profile. And after talking to him, I'm like, well, you don't. Right?
You go, there's a profile?
Well, yeah. I mean, we all have our own bias, right? I mean, you talk to land flippers all the time. You've been doing it. People will say, well, typically over 55 years old, don't live near the property, have owned it for 20 plus years. Maybe they inherited it. And so that's what they feel are the sellers. And there's truth in that, but there's a lot more. So then we ended up flying to meet each other. We spent a full day just walking through this, and I gave him all of my data from the previous, 4 years.
Yeah.
And I thought there would be enough information from the data that I was buying from DataTree to be able to run machine learning on it.
Yeah.
And there wasn't enough information there. So we had to be able to go out and get additional demographic information to power the machine learning. And I want to talk about machine learning just for a second, right? Machine learning is AI. Machine learning is not new. If you've ever seen the movie, I can't remember the name of the movie. It was about the code breaking in World War II, right? Where they were using machine learning to predict the next word, right? So it's been around 70, 80 years.
Yeah.
But machine learning, all it is the capability of your brain and everybody. And just, if we could look at the amount of information and see the patterns that are there. So what we did is we used my data, we augmented it with the demographic information. Then we went out to a couple forums and get them to put their data in there and get feedback. And this was training the algorithms on who was calling back and who was doing deals. So what those people look like beyond above 55, out of state, retired. What's the credit score range? What's the income range? Marital status, children, memberships. Do they own other properties? Where do they live, right? What do they do with their life, right? That's the pattern that's created, predicts who's going to be interested in doing a transaction with you.
Yep. So that's the machine learning. So it makes a lot of sense to me, yeah, that you would need a number of transactions and a number of transactions from different states, different regions, all sorts of different demographics. Like even our demographics, I'd say on like buying infill lots in urban areas is a lot different than rural vacant land. A younger demographic than, we might have, like 65 to 90, right? With a lot of the rural vacant land. And then the infill lots are typically people that haven't maybe owned it like that 20 or 30 years, a shorter holding time, sometimes a corporate owner, maybe a spec home builder or something, right? But yeah, you're right. Like I think you would need to feed it a lot of various types of transactions from all over for it to really work its magic.
I mean, the way it makes sense to me, and Sham, who's my business partner, always rolls his eyes when I say it, is if you had a pump, right? The algorithms are a pump. We put all the information in the pump one direction. And as it goes through, it's learning the patterns that are there. When you've told it, you're feeding it the information. Then once it gets a reasonable amount of intelligence, then you run the pump in the other direction. It's no different than teaching a child the difference between a cat and a dog. How many data points are there when you're looking at a cat and a dog? A dozen? 20? Ears, shape of the nose, whiskers, all these types of things. The person is learning that. That is essentially the fundamentals of machine learning.
Yeah.
It's learning the differences between two different things. And so when we run the pump one way, it learns those patterns, and then we run the pump the other way. The thing is with machine learning, it has to keep going back and forth. So we have, it's about 14, what we characterize as institutional real estate investors. And part of their agreement with us is they need to mail occasionally the entire list, right? If they've got a list of 40,000 and Betty
Yeah.
says, don't mail or don't action 22,000, occasionally they need to mail the bottom because she has to check the bottom to make sure nothing slipped through. And then every month they give us the feedback on what their inquiries and what their deals were. So Betty is constantly learning. There was one instance about 2 years ago where we had a person get a deal from a school. And
Yeah.
Betty had learned that you weren't going to have a high probability of buying a property from a university or a school. But when we looked at it, not every school is the University of Michigan. Not every school is the University of Pennsylvania. Some schools are just a little smaller, right? A lot smaller. And all of a sudden they get a letter, this piece of property that they've owned, and like, yeah, we should probably sell this. Here, someone's calling, call them back. So that nuanced learning that only comes with years and years of experience in any field, if it can be captured by machine learning AI and then replicated for everybody else. So someone that's brand new to the land flipping world or to the real estate world that starts with us is immediately getting the benefit of hundreds of years of experience across hundreds of different people based on
Yeah.
their data.
Well, and what we should actually do is we should probably back up and not make any assumptions that people, we should just clarify what service you guys offer and who Betty is, right? Because we
Yeah.
start talking about Betty and they're like, man, this Betty gal is smart. So let me back up. So what Reworked.ai does is within the insurance, solar, and real estate, right? Industries, we feed it a list of leads, right? And Betty is Betty's the gal, right? We'll say the gal. No, Betty's the AI scoring the leads. This you're essentially Rework.ai is lead scoring your list based on people that have the highest probability or propensity to sell to you,
Yeah.
correct? And then you express that with a Betty score. But
Yeah.
Betty's not like your top producing employee, correct?
No, no, Betty, the original name or the concept behind Betty was Betty the Bot. That was
Yeah.
3 years ago when we were putting that together. And then some marketing experts told us, don't use bot. People don't respond well to the bot. So we just stuck with Betty. But you're
Yeah.
right. Betty is our machine learning algorithms, it's our software, right? So in the real estate world, we're taking a list of potential opportunities, right? So someone's saying Fairfax County in Virginia, I'm looking for single family homes or I'm looking for land, and I've got 10,000 potentials that fit my parameters, the size, the area. And traditionally, they would mail, call, or knock on all 10,000. And what Rework does is take the 10,000, run it through the algorithms, and come back, give you the same 10,000 back, but it creates a propensity score, a proclivity score, right? Of anywhere from 440 to minus 220. And it's not telling somebody where the needle is in the haystack. It's saying, of this haystack, there's no needles over here. So don't waste your time mailing or
Yeah.
calling or driving on those. Just focus on these because this is where your deals are. So the 12 deals that were in that 10,000 list, you're still going to get the 12 deals, but you're only going to have to action historically about 53% of the list. So you're going to save anywhere between 7 and 12 times your outreach, your marketing
Yeah.
cost, even using, even the small expense that we charge, and you take that into account, because the real expense is in the postage and in the calling.
And that's what we're really getting to. You're trying to, for especially, and it doesn't matter what channel you're using, but it becomes more important the more expensive, right, marketing channel you're using. And for especially the industries using direct mail, as we know, you can be, some people can be at north of 60 cents, 70 cents a mailer a unit or even more. But so what you're kind of trying to do is saying, hey, if we spend 6 cents, 7 cents, whatever the going rate is, or maybe just say that, what is the going rate, kind of the, based on what plan you're on, what's kind of the range of getting a lead scored?
Yeah, a lead score
Yeah.
anywhere from 2 to 6 cents.
2 to 6 cents. Okay, so there we go. So we're taking those records and we're potentially saving whatever the cost of a direct mail unit is for you and your business. Some people have got it as low as 40 cents. Some people are paying up to $1, depending who you're mailing through and the volume. But we're using 2 to 6 cents to kind of tell us who not to mail, correct?
And within that cost, it's also skip tracing the address, because there's nothing more disheartening than to get those yellow labels on your mailer
Yeah.
to come back undeliverable, right?
Yeah.
So it's telling you where to go, it's telling you where the opportunities are. And again, if you're on our mid tier and you run 8,000 lines of data through Betty a month, that costs you $289. Historically, Betty, it's about 50%. So there's 4,000 mailers that could cost you $3,000, $2,800 or more. So for 289, you're saving, let's just call it 2,890, right? So it's a 10 times savings on what you're putting out there. And it's also
Yeah.
faster, right? I mean, I know a lot of people, they'll mail a certain amount a month, right? I used to mail up or a day, 100 a day, 100 a day out the door,
Yeah.
right? Mailing 8,000 and I've got 12 deals in there evenly spread out, then I've got to wait until those go out. But if I can mail 4,000 faster, so it's not only going to save you money, but just time to get to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like even sometimes, and you can take an approach, like you can also say it's not necessarily telling me those with the low score I don't mail. For me, I even use it as like a prioritizing, right? Meaning like who's my priority on the list? Who should I mail first? Well, to me, that is that the top of that list is kind of the people with the highest score. And if marketing budget's not my concern, it more just tells me the order in which I work that list. I'm going to lead with kind of the low hanging fruit based on the score. For me personally, I'm not going to, or I might just say, okay, everybody with this score below this, we're going to send a cheaper channel we're going to use a cheaper channel of marketing versus direct mail, right?
Yeah, so we have many customers that do exactly that because it takes the data and it makes it actionable. You can see, oh, wow.
Yeah.
So maybe this top 5%, I'm going to do some serious investigation on the piece of property before I mail, right? I'm going to send a hard offer. And within that hard offer, I'm going to get one of these printing companies like REI Print Mail to print me a check with that number on it, right? It's going to
Yeah.
cost me more, but I know I got a better opportunity there. I'm going to research it. I'm going to get a number on there. I'm going to get it out, and I'm going to get this deal for sure. And it just gives people the opportunity to be smarter about how they spend their money. And some people even will text the bottom half of the list, right? And for the
Yeah.
life of me, I don't know why, because I would never respond to a text, but a lot of people do, right? I still get texts all the time.
We have, my wife and I have this conversation almost weekly as we talk with new coaching clients and just talk with people that ask what channels of marketing. And what we learned, if you get 20 people in a room and you ask them like, hey, how do you feel about getting a letter? You're going to have some people that go, oh, that doesn't bother me one bit. And then some people that get real agitated by that. And you know what I mean? Take it real personal. And then you go, what about a cold call? What about a text? We were actually having this conversation last night about this, how it's so interesting. I had a student who they're only doing direct mail, and I was encouraging them to add on cold calling, right? And then I was explaining to them how like some people will respond. Like my wife, she doesn't mind a text and she'll respond like to the text, and she might even say, hey, no, thank you, just stop, don't,
Have
I'm
a
not
great day.
interested or whatever. I'm not even going to respond. Right. But it's like, she doesn't mind the back and forth, but she's not going to answer a cold call. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's so interesting. Humans, right? Human behavior. Like, some people will respond to one channel, like texting, but they won't mail, or vice versa. So yeah, it's really, you got to kind of go, it's not me, right? What would I do, or what would I think? It's not about you, because there's a pretty broad spectrum of people out there, right?
Well, what you just described is allowing your personal bias to enter
Yep.
into a decision making parameter, right?
Yep.
And that's exactly what machine learning removes. There's no human bias. There's no, oh, Travis thinks this is the ideal seller. No,
Yep.
it's not what Travis thinks. It's what the 80 million
Yep.
lines of data have shown. And I talk to a lot of land investors and real estate investors, maybe not as many as you, but what is always amazing to me is, like a fingerprint. My fingerprint and your fingerprint from a distance look similar, but upon
Yeah.
closer examination, everybody does it differently, right? And there's no
Yeah.
wrong way. It's just whatever works for you. And I know that you do this, encourage people to try different things, to not get stuck, right? And just keep agile. And your approach just needs to constantly be thinking about how you're doing it, right? And yeah, you just described a personal bias.
Well, and I think the thing is, I think the marketing channels you use to reach people, and how people respond and response rates, that fluctuates, that changes, right? That changes with marketing laws. That just changes with people's behavior, right? It changes with how quickly we can get the marketing out there. So those different channels will, like, 1 year texting's working great. A couple years later, cold calling's working better. So you kind of have to know how none of that stuff's static, right? The marketing channel, but like the lead scoring, whether we're doing AI or not, I mean, just the idea of scoring your leads, that never goes out of style. Let's say that. You know what I mean? Like, prioritizing your leads, lead scoring, knowing which ones have a highest propensity first, right? So
Based on
regardless of
something.
what channel you end up using,
Yeah.
that side of things is something
Well, I mean, lead
almost
scoring.
nobody's doing.
Right. I agree. Lead scoring, even if you're buying your data from Data Tree, by picking a state and a county and the size of the property, you're scoring, right? This is what works for you. And nobody would just be like, hey, give me 20,000 random properties throughout the country, right? They wouldn't do that,
Right.
right? They're like, no, I like Texas. I like North Carolina. I like a 2 acre lot to a 5 acre lot. Okay, that's figuring out what you want, and that's narrowing classic funnel, right? You go from the universe and you're
Yeah.
just narrowing it down. And all we do is help you narrow it down to be more efficient as you're going to spend your hard-earned dollars of getting it out the door. The other thing that you were talking about, and something that I've become intimately familiar with, is a term called omnichannel, right?
Yeah.
So when I first started in land, I was doing mailers. But when you talk to people who are experts in this space, they're talking that you need upwards of 8 points of contact to make a
Yeah.
deal. It doesn't matter if you're buying a piece of land, selling a new roof, or a hot water heater. You want to touch that person as many times as you can to create familiarity, so they recognize your logo. And then people are doing omni-channel digital,
Yeah.
mailing, texting, and then knocking, right? So by the time
Yeah.
that knocker gets there, that homeowner is like, oh yeah, I've heard of you guys. They
Right.
really haven't, because the only time they've heard of them is stuff that they're sending in, right? Whether it's a logo, oh yeah, I've heard of you guys. And
Yeah.
so it's a whole art, but it gets expensive, right?
Yeah, and without question, that's why I feel like we saw kind of a big migration, like post pandemic, of house wholesalers, house investors, coming over into land. And me as an educator, right? People looking for coaching, because you had a couple things happen, right? We know values got driven up really high, really quick. And then we also know there's all these iBuyers kind of jumped into it. It used to just be like, we buy ugly houses, right? It was the only one outfit. Then now you got OfferPad, Open Doors, Zillow took a big stab at it, right? And all these companies sending, like you're saying, that they have these unlimited budgets almost for marketing at an omni channel, like hitting everybody from every angle. And here, like, Travis buys houses, right? Like, we don't have the same budget, so those wholesalers kind of got choked out by the people that can afford that omni-channel marketing. So basically, services like yours that essentially allow you to get the best possible return on your spend, stretch your dollars the most, are important, because we can't compete with these larger outfits.
You said that so eloquently, right? if you're new to land or whatever, you've been in it for a little bit and you just quit your W-2, you're watching your expense, right? And there are groups out there, I can tell you, because some of them are our customers, right? They spend a lot of money
Yeah.
to get leads, and it's intimidating, right? Because you're like, well, I'm going to mail 8,000 a month, or I'm going to mail 4,000 a month. People are mailing 150,000 a month, right? And that's not all they're doing, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to go head to head with them, you
Right.
probably will lose, right? You need
Yeah.
something to be able to get down further in the funnel to be operationally expense efficient, right?
Yeah.
I love that old phrase, who gets rich at a gold rush, right? The person selling the
Yeah.
shovels, right?
Yeah.
You got to be careful about people selling the shovels in any
Right.
aspect of what you're doing, and make sure there's enough value in what they're doing that
Who aren't also running their own claim at the same time, because that's what I'd be doing. I'd be selling shovels during the day, and then after hours, I'd be out there at my own claim, right, prospecting like everybody else.
well, I'd be running my own claim and
Yeah.
subleasing components of my claim to other people, right? I'd have
Yeah.
three revenue streams.
Yeah. That's
I'd
that's
open a
me. Like,
I'd open a bar down the street, because that's really where you're going to make the money
yeah.
at a gold.
Yeah. I love it. Well, yeah, I like how you phrase that, kind of like getting kind of like moving from top of funnel to middle of funnel sooner, right? Like I like that. That makes a lot of sense. And that's the conversion rate piece of it. That's where, like, if your education that you're providing isn't strong in like market selection, pulling your lists, like a lot of these things, how educators will combat that is just by like playing the volume game, right? Of just like, let's just get absurd amounts of marketing out there, and you're bound to get a deal. Well, you don't need any education or any courses to do that, right? You know what I mean? Like, you
Just
can
need
just spray
cash.
and pray at a mass level, but it's just so darn expensive. If we can get some good education where we're picking a strong market it's not such a hot market that nobody's going to want to sell to you, right? But there's enough demand on the buy side that we can get in there, still buy the property, capture some equity, but there's a low days on market, a good absorption rate on the sell side. We've kind of put you in the right market. And then now when you're pulling that list for the market, we go, okay, who has the most propensity to sell to us? You're really stacking the odds in an investor's favor, right? When we do that versus just like looking at a map, picking a city and mailing everybody, within the city and multiple campaigns.
I agree with everything you're saying. The other subtle thing that Betty does is she takes the inaccuracies, right? The swings,
Yeah.
right? I'm sure you've seen it, and your followers have seen it. You got a good letter, you put some real thought into it. You've thought about where you want to go. You mail 10,000. You're in. I've been there, right? It's going out the door. You're like, well, this is gonna be a good one. I got some good properties here. And it's crickets.
Yeah.
And then 3 weeks later, you mail 3,000. You think, well, I don't know, it's a bit of a flyer, and you get a lot of responses. And I say that Betty knocks out about 47%, but I always tell people she doesn't grade on a curve. You put 8,000 in, don't be surprised if Betty comes back and says to mail 2,000. And then I've had hundreds of phone calls like, Fred, what do you mean? It says 53%. I only mailed 2,000. Betty's just saving you from wasting your money. Right? She doesn't.
Well, and you and I talked about this when we uploaded 60,000 records, right? That we ran through your system. And that's when we talked about this, you said, well, hey, the input is going to have a lot to do with it. Meaning if you already have your filters dialed in, like if when I pull my list, I'm already saying only people that live out of state, only people that have owned 10 or more years, right? And there's all these things, kind of that inputs in there, then Betty's not going to weed out. If a larger percent of my list might have higher Betty scores than somebody who just pulls a county list with no filters, right?
And you're absolutely right. But I always encourage people, don't try to outthink the system, right?
Yeah.
I used to pull out of state owners, right? Out of zip code owners. And a lot of people do that. And that's fine. It is a filter. It is a coming further into the funnel, potentially. But you could be leaving opportunities on the table. And so for the cost of the data and the cost of running it through Betty, you haven't put it to paper and mailed it yet. So it's not your big expense. You might be missing somebody who does live down the street and who has
It's a great point to maybe, instead of have the filters, you're saying maybe feed it everything, right? And then go with everything with the highest score versus trying to outsmart it and give a smaller input or a smaller list, which is only being charged 2 to 6 cents to lead score anyway. Because that's the main thing, is that's not killing you, that cost of lead scoring. So that's a good point. And you always have to pick new markets when you kind of run out of records, right? And you're always like going to find the next list. So that's a good point of possibly just like feeding it the whole county, and with your acreage criteria and everything,
Yeah,
obviously, but just feed it the whole list, and versus trying to outsmart the system and give it a better input, you're saying.
that's right. That's right. Because other
Yeah,
people are
I
doing
I
that
like it.
and they're
I like
leaving
it.
opportunities.
Yeah, I like it. I'll definitely try that. That's what we used to do. Like I was taught years ago, somebody said, hey, well, if you take a look at the mailing zip code, and if the property is in the same zip code and they match, they're probably not going to sell. So don't do that. And then so I had a student actually. So I remember that, and we did that for a while, and I kind of forgot about it. And then we had a student who bought from a gal who she owned the only vacant lot in the whole subdivision. It's been vacant for 30 years. She was kind of using it as a little garden and stuff, right? And they bought it from her, and she was living next door to the lot,
I mean,
and they sold it in one day on market to a builder, right? And that's like my story of the like outsmarting yourself, and saying, hey, we only do out of state or whatever, we only do people out of zip code. Is that exact story? It was like one day on market, and it was incredible sale.
I bought properties next door to people as well, and ideally, the only thing you want is someone who's interested in making a deal. You don't care
Yeah,
where they live. You don't care how old they are. You don't care how long they've had the properties. Life changes, right? By looking at credit score, and she also
yeah,
looks at credit score movement, right? Up or
yeah,
down, right? That's a big indicator of something has happened in that person's life, right? Good or bad. Got a job, lost a job, divorce, bankruptcy, married, right? 6 months ago, they were not a seller. That's a long-term
yeah,
hold. All of a sudden, priorities change. They have an 8-month-old
yeah,
child in the house. All of a
yeah,
sudden, maybe I'm not going to put a man cave out there. I'm not going to do this. I should just sell it. Oh, here's a letter. I should call this person
yeah.
back.
Well, I think that's a great point, because that's what I was going to segue into, is saying, okay, so Betty's lead scoring, but what is Betty looking at to lead score? And you just touched on a lot of things at once. You some of those life events. You talked about credit score, swings in credit score. Maybe kind of just recap that of the different data points that you're looking
This was
that
the
you're looking at.
this was the hardest component of setting up this company, was getting access to this data, right?
Yeah,
Because in
because
the United States,
it's not one like
no,
enterprise software you're getting access to, that you
no.
guys have
No,
to
it's
check
it's
this, right?
when we were
Several.
first doing it in Sham, my partner said, "Look, the data in data tree is not rich enough to run a machine learning algorithm. It's
Yeah,
just not enough meat on the bone." So we started reaching out to data providers and asking for updated address, credit score range, income range, age range, property zones, marital status, children, people in the house, cars,
yeah,
any debt, right? All these things that make us unique and individual and are available in the United States. That's another conversation. The response was, yes, of course we have that data, and if you need it for the entire country, it's $1.2 million. So we had to find multiple data providers, because not all data provider has it everywhere, that gives us access to this information for computational purposes only. Routinely I get asked, okay, Fred, but why does this property have this score? Can you tell us
yeah,
why this one has got a higher
yeah,
score? And the answer is, if we start sharing that level of demographic information, the
yeah,
cost goes from 2 to 6 cents to $2 to $3 per line,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
data is a whole industry in itself. And by using it for computational purposes only, and we even thought, if we get big enough and have enough of this data, we can create our own database and we don't have to go out and pay for it. We can use it internally before we go. But all of our contracts were audited on a quarterly basis. We have to dump the information. We use it, run it through
yeah,
machine learning, and they have to erase it. So
yeah.
they didn't get to be these big data companies by giving stuff away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's easy as like a user to say, well, that'd be really cool, Fred. Why don't you guys just have an interactive map where I hover over every parcel and you give me the Betty score ahead of time, and then I run a filter and I only pull, right? And it's a lot heavier lift, right? And a lot more expensive lift than a user might understand or realize when they're making that request, right?
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I'm sure we've all had the situation where someone knocks on our door selling something, access to fiber, pest control, roofing,
Yeah.
windows, siding. Those individuals are using a canvassing app, right? Which is a map, and it
Yeah.
tells you the name and maybe some sort of information about the individual there. And so we've got conversations with a couple of these canvassing apps about providing that information
Yeah.
live. And the problem is, it's really expensive, right? Because you're
Yeah.
downloading the entire country, and some of
Right.
them that do it they're looking at census level data, which is not very good. It doesn't give you much information. The individual knocker, the individual canvasser is going to look at the house, look at the car, and think, do I want to knock this house? Right. So for our solar and roofing product, we're working with some roofers and CRMs to upload that information. So when they're setting up a
Yeah.
campaign to go canvas an area, they get the information from us and they lay out the route they want to go and who they want to talk to, because that may be a renter. Do you want to talk to a renter about a new
Yeah.
roof? That's just a waste of time, right?
Yeah. Great
So
point. Yeah. And let's talk about that, because you guys have added a lot of tech integrations, and I'll just be honest, like I haven't implemented any of those yet, but I was looking through those. Why don't you share kind of some of those tech? Because like you said, there's other industries where a lot of our listeners, the bulk might be land investors, but other industries we might have some insurance people, some solar people, right? Where things are a little different, and there are people knocking, there are routes you plan out there, and there's associated apps and tech for that. And the house people will get this because things like Deal Machine, there's a lot of other softwares like that that are kind of driving for dollar
driving
type
for dollars,
apps,
yeah.
right? So those type of people who are knocking for dollars, right? Maybe talk about some of those apps, and then talk about the integrations you guys have added that didn't exist when we started kind of working
Yeah,
together.
right. I mean, we discovered about a year and a half ago that you can onboard one customer, and that's great. I talk to many of our new customers, and we give that personal service and spend time chatting, and I become friends with many of them. But if you onboard an integration, whether it's a CRM or a print house, then you're onboarding all of their customers, right? And so one of the first ones that we did was with Jack Bosch, an investment
Yeah.
dominator, right? And
Oh,
Jack,
excellent. You guys are integrated with the CRM now? That's
yeah, so we're
fantastic.
we're
Yeah.
inside Investment Dominator. So all you need to do is have a reworked
Yeah.
account, and then you just do. There's a quick wizard that's about 2 steps, and then all you got to do is you
Yeah.
can grab your list, click the button, get Betty score. It kicks it over via API. We do our business and we kick it back. The other area that we've done about 3 or 4 integrations with
Yeah.
actual print houses. Now those integrations are on a private label, right? They don't it's their product. They're selling it. They're adding some extra juice to it, and we're just a wholesaler at that point of the
Yeah.
information, and we're fine with that too, because the number one thing that's important for our business is volume. Right? We make a
Yeah.
little bit of money on every single row we process, just like Walmart.
Yeah.
Everything you buy in Walmart, they don't make much money, but they sell a
Yeah.
lot of
There's
it.
not a 30% markup, but they're moving a little bit of product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then we got into HubSpot, and we're well down with Odoo, we've got Zapier integrations, right? So,
Yeah.
if we talk about canvassing apps, we've got Sales Rabbit, RepCard, Enzio. There's a half
What
a
about
dozen.
Map My Customers? Was that one?
No, I haven't had a
You
conversation.
guys had you guys had a map. I think you guys had a mapping integration I saw on there where it was like mapping my leads. But I saw a whole gallery of integrations. I expected to see Zapier on there, but then I see all these other direct integrations. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah, and it's as we were talking off camera, it's important to know the watering hole of where your future customers are and make it
Yeah.
easy, right? Nobody wants to spend a bunch of time downloading here, uploading here, downloading here, and putting it back in. If we can make the whole thing easier, it works for everybody, because we're just staying within the machine learning space, but real estate, solar, roofing, and insurance. And we've also got, a multitude of customers coming to us and asking us to build bespoke algorithms, right?
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
whole new world for us. And it takes a lot of their data, right? So I have people call and say, hey, I've got 100 customers. Can you use that
Yeah.
to build an algorithm to find lookalikes? The answer is no, right? It's not 100, it's not 1,000, it's not 500,000. It's like
Yeah.
a million, right?
Right. Yeah.
If it's going to be worth a darn, it's got to be large, right? Because anything
Yeah.
else, then we're just lying. And then we're saying that we're going to build you something that's going to work. And we don't want to build. We had a customer just yesterday. We were on the phone. We're like, look, we couldn't get a causation based on your customers and the
Yeah.
data that we augmented. We couldn't find a causation, right? We couldn't find why. There was no pattern. The machine learning
Right.
did not find a pattern. So, and we hadn't charged them a dime. And they said, look, we don't see how we can continue this, because there's no path
Yeah.
for anybody to make money on this. They were sitting there thinking, wow, these people are honest, right? We're not trying to
Yeah,
trick
they
anybody.
could have strung me along 2
Yeah.
years, and we could have ran all these different. Yeah.
Yeah, because who knows, right? There's so many different
Yeah.
variables in whether they're knocking or mailing, and we do robust testing. Any file that comes up has got 7 different gates, and for people that use Rework, they know on their dashboard they can see the file, see where it is in the processing. It used to take like 12 hours to process a reasonably sized file. Now we're doing it in like 45 minutes because we've just gotten.
Well, let's share that with people. So you guys have a client portal, so people understand what you do. I'm going to talk. Make the assumption that people know nothing about it. Okay, so you log in, web based, right? Client portal. You upload your list. It is a bring your own data, right? Bring your own data.
For real estate, it's bring your own data, right?
Okay.
So you go to the web page, you create a profile, you pick your industry, right? I'm in real
Yeah.
estate. It goes industries, you grab real estate. I'm in solar, you grab solar. And then there's a couple questions that Betty will ask you, right? They're in a form. You answer the questions, you put your credit card in, you pick what you want to do, and then it's going to say upload, right? If you're in real estate, or upload or lead gen, right? So we
Yeah.
can lead gen for other industries. We've not decided to do that for real estate because people are very passionate and maybe even irrationally connected to their original data source.
Yeah. Well put. Yeah.
And so it's like
But you are actually providing the data for
for solar,
insurance
roofing,
industry
and
and for solar.
insurance. Yeah.
Yeah, solar roofing hand in hand, right? We talked about that. Same thing. We just had solar recently put on, and two neighbors, same thing. Which again, like pulling the list, right? We know this houses of this age are about due for a roof. You don't put the solar on before you rip off the old roof, right? So those go hand in hand. That makes a lot of sense. Insurance, though, is kind of a broad umbrella term, right? Like, is there specific like property, casualty, life, or all of the above?
So again, back to my comment about a million records of customers, a
Yeah,
million yeses. How did you have a million people sign up for your service? That means you probably have 10 million people that didn't, right?
yeah,
And so in our insurance offering, we need that data. And obviously it takes a while. You got to go under strict confidentiality
yeah,
auditing, but it then becomes their product. It's their algorithm and it's just for them because if you're a big insurance company selling a particular product and you use your data to feed
yeah.
the algorithm, you don't want your competitor down the street to get access to that, and we're sensitive to that. And so we create exclusivity in that product for them.
So are you saying that you're building a bespoke algorithm for that insurance company? You're not necessarily, I'm not going to the website saying, "Hey, I'm looking for property and casualty within Arizona," and then you're providing me a data set with lead scoring. You're actually building out custom solutions for that industry.
And we have
Okay.
custom landing pages for them, and we're integrated via APIs into
Yeah.
their software. I mean, we talk about it because it's important. And if you look at the direct mailing world, insurance and financial solutions is probably number one in what comes into our mailboxes, right?
Yeah.
Credit
Yep.
cards, loans, insurance. I mean, they spend millions of dollars every month getting,
Yeah.
and we all see it. I get the same darn mailer from the same company every month. It's
Yeah.
the same one. And a month and a half ago, I actually tried to reach out to them and be like, "Will you just please consider using Rework because you're driving me
Yeah.
crazy? You don't have a
Yeah.
good call to action. You're sending me this mailer every month, and they're just playing the law of large numbers that eventually they get it." And so we've been able to get a couple of them that don't have their own robust data teams to
Yeah.
outsource that to our engineers.
Yeah. So what's next for you guys? What do you feel like what are you innovating now? What are you kind of iterating, improving, optimizing for like for real estate investors right now?
Well, real estate investors, it's just getting better, right? Betty gets an update about every 14 to 15 days. And the volume that's coming through us now, we're just squeezing out the last bit of juice in real estate. We are doing name parsing. So we all know that when we get a list from someplace, it's John Doe in different formats. And then so Betty is looking at that and using a large language model from Meta, Llama, to do name parsing and put that into a digestible form because everybody likes to use dynamic tags. So they can say,
Yeah.
"Hey Jane," "Hey John, how you?" And so we're
Right.
putting
Do
that out
your
there.
home property owner,
Dear,
comma, right?
dear,
Like, well,
dear
you see
blank, right?
those merges or dear blank. Yeah.
Yeah. And even in a text, right? If I could get a text that says, "Hey, Fred, I
Yeah.
might be more inclined to continue reading." Now, we know your wife is going to read it, but it's just if you can personalize it, right? And I know something
Yeah.
that you coach a lot of is you can get the best data. You can know the name, but you've got to be smart on what that letter or that outreach looks like. What's your call to
Yeah.
action? What are you selling? Right? What
Right.
solution are you giving to that customer? And can you say it in one sentence, right? Can you catch
Yeah.
their attention to have them keep reading and be like, oh, this is interesting, right? You've got to be clear. And we all see it all the time on the direct mail. There's just no call to action, right? And it's just
Right.
painful.
Or it's, and that's even what we've learned and have tested is sometimes we wanted to give everybody the option of everything, and it was like, hey, go to my website, or fax it, or email us, or mail back, or call in. And we're essentially, right, like we're trying to give everybody every option. And then ultimately, if you just have like one call to action, and like it says call us here, here's your reference number, right? Like that's like the single call to action. It allows you to kind of streamline things operationally, and two, it kind of just like clarifies, like for the person, like, well, what do I mail it back, do I call it back, do I email, what's, that when we try to do too much and try to do everything, the message is not
Get
simple and
lost.
clear.
The message is
And that's when I showed my father-in-law and my parents, like my first mailer, like I'm like, hey, what do you think? You're the demographic
really
here. If you get
discriminate.
this, and they're like, what size font is this? Like 6, like one. They're like, let me get my father-in-law was like, let me grab my glasses, and it made me realize immediately, like, okay, less words, bigger font size, right? So some of these things you don't know on your own end when you're just thinking of
And
copy,
and
you
and
know.
that's where people like you come in and really help people. I mean, I learned that in the beginning, right?
Yeah,
Neutral offers, big font, clean, nothing
yeah,
fancy, and just
yeah,
one mechanism to get in touch. And beyond real estate, we as I said, we're getting into solar and roofing, and we're using computer vision to be able to understand the structure as well. We use the same
yeah,
demographic data points, but then we're looking at the structure. We're looking at the geometry of the roof. We're looking at the sunlight, the hours of sunlight. In roofing, our computer vision is able to tell if they're at end of life or having damage to their roof. So retail roofers can go out and knock. Hey, Mr. King, our records show that your roof is at end of life, and you're like, really? Yeah. Well, it is 22 years old. Come on in, let's have a conversation. But then the whole home services world, right? If you
yeah,
think about a roof, or if you think about solar, completely discretionary, right? Can you
yeah.
afford to spend $15,000 or whatever it's going to be to put solar up? You don't have to. You can just continue to pay.
15. I paid 45, man. Come on.
Okay,
Had to have those battery boards, right? And the
exactly.
and the
Right,
power walls.
15 and up. But a roof is not discretionary, right? If a
Yeah.
roof is failing, and the cost to replace a roof that has not failed versus a roof that has failed is a different animal, right? And then you get into
Yeah.
home services, and we've got a customer now that we're working with for windows. So we're looking at the correlation
Yeah.
between the state of the roof, the demographic of the owner, and the windows, right?
Yeah.
And it's the structure, the person. Is there that, again, causation on the windows? Can we look at power consumption? Should this
Yeah.
2,800 square foot house be drawing that has two
Yeah.
people living in it? Should it be paying upwards of $300 a month in this zip code for electricity? No, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Windows could be lousy, right? Could be 20-year-old aluminum single pane windows that they've got the
Yeah.
wherewithal to replace them. They just hadn't thought about it until you go knock or send them a letter.
Isn't it beautiful that we can access this data? You know what I mean? And have these kind of insights, and then about not just the home, right? But the property, right? Especially when we're talking real estate and stuff, or even home services, right? We're talking about a property, and then we also have an owner. Same thing with land. We have access to just so much information, right, with an owner. Like, if I want, we want the letter to go to the right people that have that higher propensity, but at the same time we don't want to share everything we know, because, like, the data we pull, I could, in my letter, I could say, hey Joe, didn't see you at the recent NRA meeting, right? But how's that 1988 Ford F-150
Probably not going to
as you
help.
go to this church? Right? Like the demographic information we can pull is scary,
Sorry to hear
with
about
how
that.
many kids are in the house, what ages,
Yeah.
credit score, all of the, are you registered Democrat, Republican? It's nuts. The insights we have on the demographics of a person now, and then also with, right, the property information. It's really incredible for us as kind of like marketers, right, or marketing, to have that versus blindly, like, um, having to manually pull permits decades and decades ago and then go knock on doors with not knowing what's on the other side, right?
And just think about the people that are still doing every door direct mail,
Yeah,
right? That are still sending this $1.20 glossy large mailer to every blessed door, right? And
yeah,
it irks me, right? And now that I've been in this world for a while, I go into some of these master classes with other people that are driving direct mail, and it's just, I mean, I look forward to go to the mailbox now to see what's there, to see what nuggets,
yeah,
to see who's doing something well, right? And it bothers me every door direct because they will tell you, oh, but it's the cheapest per unit. Yeah, but not if you're
yeah,
selling to everybody and
yeah.
there's no, you get one response for the entire thing. And that postman or post person puts two in my mailbox, right?
The only person that works out for is the direct mail company, right? The send more mail mentality is some of the best advice ever if you own the mail house. But
Well,
as the investor trying to get better return on marketing spend, you can, yeah, you can, man, you can spend as much as you want with the lowest conversion rate, right? And response rate. Awesome. Well, hey, Fred, anything we didn't touch on today that you wanted to cover? I will put up I'll put up the links to your website. We'll put on the episode webpage. We'll link everybody over to Reworked. And
that is
anything we didn't get to though?
No, on the website you can book a call, right? We like talking to people, whether it's solar, roofing, it doesn't matter. Real estate, you're brand new in land flipping and watching Travis and thinking about getting into it. Book a call, we'll talk. The other thing that I always tell people is we have a guarantee, right? If you use us and don't subjectively and objectively see the results, then let us know, and we're going to give you your money back. Now, don't do that 8 months into it because that's a bit sketchy. But if you're get your list and you mail it and you're like, look, I got a 2% response rate before and I got a 1.9 on what we did with you. Okay, we're sorry, right? Whatever, for whatever reason, there's too many
Yeah.
variables downstream from what we do for us to be jerks. So we'll give you
Yeah.
your money back. We'd like to see the results. We'd like to see why and what you did so we can learn from it. But we're
Yeah.
not here to get rich on $149 from John Doe who's just getting into land flipping or anything else.
Right. And ultimately at the end of the day, the that B2C, that single land investor, that single customer anyway for you guys isn't your big profit center. If anything, that's your highest maintenance, highest touch client when you have these kind of B2B type relationships and these much larger customers. It's really a service that you guys are honestly you guys are still providing kind of the B2C to us investors as you grow and do what you're doing. So hopefully you don't run any AI algorithms to kind of look at that like time spent on trouble tickets with the little land investor versus the big insurance company. So we appreciate the service you're offering. And you're right. I found what you're saying to be consistent with what you actually do. If somebody needs to pause for a month or something, right? Uh,
Travis, again, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Always
Absolutely.
good to talk
I
with you.
appreciate you, Fred. Hey, man, and congrats, you guys, on the success of the business, and you're filling a need, and you guys were also kind of spearheading it and leading it. You're kind of doing AI before AI was cool, or I would say before AI was mainstream
Yeah.
cool, right?
This
So,
story
so
started,
you,
and
you
then
got a head start.
yeah,
You
it
got a
was
head
good
start on
timing.
everybody.
Yeah,
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Fred. Appreciate you.
thank you.
Thanks for tuning into The King Show. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Also, don't forget to head over to travisking.com for show notes, resources, bonus content, and more ways to connect with me and the guests that you hear on the show. Remember, greatness is already within you. It's time for you to boss up and claim it. Stop building someone else's empire and start building your own.